it must leave you with a sense of urgency regarding Jesus's imminent return. And I think that Jesus wanted every generation of Christians to live with that. And that is why he's essentially saying, I could come back now, I could be a while, but always be ready. Why? Because living with a sense of urgency that there's not much time left, there might not be much time left, and that at any moment Jesus could come back, that is certainly how, if you look at chapters 24 and 25, that is how Jesus wanted us to live. Now somebody might say, well, if he knew he wasn't coming back for like 2,000 years, then why did he say I could come back at any moment?
Hey, welcome to Whitefields Community Church Sermon Extra. Hey, great to have you with us once again this week. I'm here with Pastor Nick Cady, pastor of Whitefields Community Church here in Longmont, Colorado. And we are in our series, Behold Your King. We're studying through the book of Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew, chapter by chapter, verse by verse. And we are in chapter 24, doing the last verses 32 through 51. And the sermon this past Sunday was Living Ready for Jesus' Return. And you definitely want to get that download. If you were not able to be with us here on Sunday morning, then you can go to our website and you can download it there, get caught up. And of course, if you are watching us on YouTube or Facebook, you like and subscribe, interact any way you can, or your favorite podcasting app, rate and review, leave a comment, any of those kind of things, like that really helps us out. You're like, how can I help you guys do what you're doing? And that's one way. Interact somehow. If you're not subscribed, go hit the subscribe button. Trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, that would be great. And go ahead and hit the subscribe button. So when people like typing in things like Jesus return, when is Jesus returning? These kind of questions, then they are hopefully our video is going to pop up, our podcast will pop up, and we'll be able to provide them with Christ-centered, gospel-centered, biblical answers to their questions. So do that. That would help us out a lot. And so today we want to kind of talk about why is this important? So when we're going to use the word eschatology, and really what's that? The study of the end times, right? Why is eschatology? Why is it important that we are looking? And of course, we've taken a decided, path and a view on these chapters as we've been going through 24 and 25, the Olivet Discourse, very important stuff. And, it's in your title, being ready. But why would you say this is important for us to get into?
Yeah. I have heard, I heard this term recently from somebody. He said, some people are eschatological agnostics. And what that means is that they just say, I don't know, I'm sure it'll pan out in the end. I know that, Christians get into debates over these things and maybe even divide. And I just don't want to divide over these things. And I don't want to ruffle other people's feathers. So I'm just going to say, I don't know, God knows, it'll turn out in the end. Now, it is true that God knows and it will turn out in the end. But what you're alluding to right now is that what you believe about these things will shape the way that you live. It will shape the way that you read other passages in the Bible. And it has what we would call a telos, which means it's a Greek word for it's leading you somewhere. It will shape you as a person. And this is something I actually think about a lot when I think about different Christian groups and then different interpretations of the Bible, right? Within the realm of orthodoxy, there are differing views on the interpretation of the eschatological text. And I want to come out real quick and just say, on Sunday mornings, I have not been focusing on that. I haven't been focusing on, some people think this, some people think that, but I think this is a better place for that, these videos. But I do want to say, I recognize that my position that I hold on this, our church's position, we hold it very open-handedly in the sense of saying, this is how I read these passages. This is how I understand them. Here's why. But also, look, there are other views that I respect and honor, and I don't hold them personally. I see problems with them. I also recognize there are probably problems with this interpretive framework as well. So I think what you have to do in these is, hold an open hand, be open to hearing other people out, the best version of their view, and then coming to a conclusion about how you understand the scriptures to be speaking. And like I said, those all fall under the realm of orthodoxy. Mm-hmm. And these are what we call secondary theological issues. However, these secondary theological issues often do shape the kind of life that you live, the kind of way that you think about things. And so how does this view of being ready, of looking towards the future and Jesus's imminent return, how does it shape the way that we live? Well, I mean, I could go through lots of ideas, but the idea that the church is going to be removed from the world, that those who remain will go through a time of great tribulation, I think that should give us a sense of urgency. You know, if you knew that you only had a certain amount of time and that other people were going to go through some really terrible things, if they didn't respond soon, I think that shapes the way that you relate to other people. And I would say this, whatever eschatological framework we choose, one of the things it must do two things, now I think about it. Okay, number one, it must leave you with a sense of urgency regarding Jesus's imminent return. Mm-hmm. And I think that Jesus wanted every generation of Christians to live with that. And that is why he's essentially saying, I could come back now, I could be a while, but always be ready. Why? Because living with a sense of urgency that there's not much time left, there might not be much time left, and that at any moment Jesus could come back, that is certainly how, if you look at chapters 24 and 25, that is how Jesus wanted us to live. Now somebody might say, well, if he knew he wasn't coming back for like 2,000 years, then why did he say I could come back at any moment? Why? Well, here's why, because it shapes the way you live. It shapes you with an urgency. It's very easy to say, oh, there's plenty of time. I'm sure somebody else will take care of it. And this Sunday, as we look at chapter 25, that's actually the problem with the guy who gets one of the three servants, right? We're going to tell the story of the servant of the parable of the talents. Well, essentially the one guy says, well, you know, I didn't do anything with what you gave me because I knew that you were very powerful. And basically you can do whatever you want. You don't need puny little me to go out and make you more money. You have everything and you're powerful. Well, that's essentially the person who abdicates by saying, well, if God wants to save people, he will. He doesn't need me. Well, yeah, he doesn't need you, but he's called you. And you have a responsibility, and he could come back at any moment. So to be ready for Jesus' return means to faithfully steward what he's given you in the meantime. So I think that sense of urgency that drives us, that says there might not be a tomorrow, that is a must for whatever eschatological framework, because that is certainly what Jesus wanted us to have. The other one is that it should not lead to fear, right? So if you choose an eschatological framework and the predominant feeling that it leaves you with is just terror. Like, I think that is not, like, you should have a sense of confidence. You should be comforted, like encouraged, as it says in 1 Thessalonians, encourage one another with these things. So if you have an eschatological framework that leaves you afraid, I think there's something wrong with it. That should be kind of a red flag. That's not what Jesus intended. He intended this to be encouraging, but also to set a fire under you that says any moment, right? So there's not much time, therefore be ready by being actively engaged. So those are the two things that I would say, that definitely your eschatology will shape you. And how is it shaping you? And I think that's also true of other theological positions, even under the category of under the realm of orthodoxy, the things that you could call family debates amongst Christians. At the end of the day, you know, they might both fall under the realm of orthodoxy, but what kind of person does it create you to be? I think that is important.
Oh, very much so. Yeah, no, I think it's a great overarching definition of why this is important and why, you know, people should be tuning in as we go through this. And you know, you've had people come up after church, and I know people have spoken to me like how it's important that we're actually tackling these issues. We're going through the Bible verse by verse, chapter by chapter, and when a lot of people would just not go near this, right?
Yeah, so that I had multiple people come to me this past Sunday particularly and just say, I have never heard these things taught. Like maybe I've like heard Christians talk about them, but I've never like heard it taught expositionally like this. And the reason for that is because one particular person, he grew up in a church which follows a liturgical calendar. And what that means is that every year that church covers the same passages, in their homilies or their preaching, and they would never talk about this. Yeah. Like you could go there for 60 years of your life and never hear this taught because it's not part of their calendar. You'd have to go to like special groups and things like that, but generally they're going to be avoiding these things too because they're going to be choosing topics of their own choosing. This is one of the great benefits of going through the Bible sequentially, is that it forces you to deal with those passages that are challenging and to face them. What does this mean? Yeah. But also, I'll tell you what, it's been so helpful for me. I was just thinking about this today. Matthew is the first book of the Bible that I taught on Sunday mornings when I planted my first church in Eger, Hungary. I taught through Matthew, and I was just thinking about today, I have not referenced any of my notes from that. I mean, it was 20 years ago, first of all. But the other thing is like, now it's like so fresh, it's going through it like it's for the first time. And a big aha thing for me was reading the end of Matthew 23, where Jesus gives those two predictions. The first is Jerusalem will be destroyed within that same generation. And again, that ties in with, as we've talked about in this podcast, Matthew 27, where they say, let his blood be upon us and our children. And that happened within 40 years. But then the other promise, but I'm going to come again. So when the disciples ask, when are these things going to happen? They're talking about those two things. And anyway, I just say that to say what a benefit it is to take your time to slowly exposit all of these verses. And just quick shout out, John MacArthur, he passed away yesterday from our time of recording today. And I was just thinking, man, like I didn't agree with him on everything, but I think the church is better for having had him. And you know what he did is for 50-something years, sequentially taught through the Bible. Yeah. And also a big advocate for premillennialism. So.
Yeah, he definitely was. No, I certainly have gained so much from his teaching. I really appreciated how much authority he would teach. Definitely. I mean, he really you might have disagreed with him, but by the end of the sermon, you're like, maybe I don't disagree with you, because he was so he would be like, people, this is what the word says, and you figure he's speaking to 9,000, 10,000 people every Sunday, and how many people have read his commentaries and listened to his sermons and just grown, and I would say, he's very faithful just to teaching what the word said and going through the Bible sequentially, as you said, and I think a lot of people, it's been a great loss for the church, but great gain for heaven. So and
one of the things I did a paper based on one of his views when I was in school, and one of the things that's great about John MacArthur is that everything he's ever said has been not only recorded but transcribed, and he's just created resources.
Oh yeah,
and I think that's even something that we're trying to do too. And I think that's a great thing to do, which is just create resources all the time for people, and anyway, I hope that we can provide some of that, but he certainly did.
He certainly did. No, that's a great shout out to him and to, we just think about Grace Church there in California, as they probably mourn his family, and just standing in prayer with them. And just thank you for John MacArthur. So do we want to move on and look at something else, or we...
You tell me, Mike.
Well, there's some things we can, you made some statements on Sunday that we need to get into so we can start, making the internet shake. So one of the things we talk about is two stages of Jesus' return, and that you mentioned. And so what does that mean? Because, that when people think about Jesus coming back, he said he's coming back again, his second coming. He never mentioned his 1.5 coming or his third coming.
Right.
So when you say two stages, what are we talking about?
Well, did he call it his second coming? I think he called it his return.
His return, yeah.
Right, well, you can return in 2 stages, no problem. Yeah. Here's the other thing that I think many people might not realize is that, last week in our video we talked about the preterist view that sees mostly everything, if not everything, in Matthew 24 as having been already fulfilled in 70 AD. Well, I would just point out that the preterist view also believes that Jesus' coming is in 2 stages. In fact, they would say that in 70 AD, that was the first stage of his coming, and then the second stage of his coming will be his glorious return at the end of the age. In other words, it's just a question of when is the first stage of 2 of Jesus' coming, and did it already happen, or is it still yet to happen? And then what happens during that first stage of his coming? So they would say the first stage of his coming took place in 70 AD, and it involved the destruction of Jerusalem and the judgment of Jerusalem. I and premillennial John MacArthur would say that it is going to happen in the future, and it will involve the catching away or the rapture of the church. And then the second coming, if you will, the parousia, the second stage of it will involve Jesus' glorious return. In other words, I'm not saying anything that they're not saying. It's just the timing of it and the circumstances around it. So that would be my point.
Yeah, and that brings up the important point of kind of why eschatology is correct, because if there is a tribulation period, then one view would say that there are those that will go through that tribulation.
Sure.
And then there's our view that would say Christians are not going to go through the tribulation. So that creates 2 frameworks,
definitely,
right?
Yeah. I mean, some people are going to, if you believe you're going through the tribulation, then, you're going to be maybe preparing for that in different ways. I believe I'm not going to go through a tribulation, so I don't need to prepare for that, right? And so I'm not stockpiling beans and guns, right? But somebody else might think that they need to. Personally, again, I think that's one where it's like, okay, so that shapes the way you think about things. If you are going through that, well, who are you planning to shoot with your guns? I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure that creates the best teleology, if you will.
Yeah, and but just to that point, then why would we come to the conclusion that the church will not go?
Oh yeah, well, it's not because I like where it leads better. I mean, that's not why you should do something. So that is what will happen. If you believe something, it will lead to certain things. But why should you believe it? You shouldn't believe it based on, well, I like where this one leads better than where that one leads. You should believe it based on the Bible. And I think that we have multiple examples from the Bible of God removing his people before he brings a temporal judgment. Now, I just point out that there's a difference between temporal judgments and eternal judgment. So there is coming an eternal judgment, but a temporal judgment is like where God brings judgment upon people that doesn't necessarily affect the eternal outcome of their soul. So, for example, Ananias and Sapphira, they get killed for lying. Now, that's a temporal judgment. Are we going to see them in heaven? I think there's a good chance we could see them in heaven, right? Because it isn't that they weren't believers. It's that God judged them for that specific sin at that time. Now, maybe they were believers, and it seems that they were. They were in the church. They're suffering persecution as a result of being in the church. Sounds like they had faith to me. I mean, God only knows. But I kind of expect to see them in heaven, even though God took their lives here on earth because as a warning to the church and like as a temporal judgment. My point is that whenever you see temporal judgments in the Bible, there are many times in which God removes his people before that judgment comes. So Lot is a good example. God's bringing judgment on Sodom and Gomorrah, removes righteous Lot, as he's called in Hebrews, and his family out of the city before the judgment comes. Noah and his family, the only righteous people on the earth, the only people willing to believe God and do what he said, and heed God's warning to repent. And what happens? God saves them out of the judgment which comes on everybody else. And so I see a pattern there that I think, especially the fact that Jesus says, as it was in the times of Noah, that's how it will be when I come again. And I would say that that's the first stage of his coming, where he brings the church out, like he did with Noah, brings the judgment on the earth, but still people are repenting and being saved during that time. That's why we see Christians in the book of Revelation. We see evangelists, we see witnesses. Those are people who became Christians during the Great Tribulation, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I think it's another verse that comes to mind is 1 Thessalonians 5:9, which is he's kind of now concerning, again, Paul's writing now concerning times and seasons, brothers, you have no need to have anything written to you. Again, he talks about the thief of the night, be not in darkness, for the day is to surprise you like a thief. But then he says, for God has not destined us for wrath, but to obtain salvation through Lord Jesus Christ. Many times that's also used as a way that the tribulation is a time of wrath, is revelation. We connect it with revelation. We connect it with God pouring out his wrath or pouring out judgment upon those who don't know, and that we are not destined for that.
Yeah, I'll give you one more verse in that same vein that touches on that, and that's in Genesis chapter 18, where Moses is having that debate with God, if you will. You remember that part where he says, well, how many, Lord, how many are in, if there are 50?
Oh, Lot has it. Or is it Moses or Lot?
I'm sorry, it's Abraham.
Abraham.
Yeah, talking about Lot. Yeah.
I'm talking about it.
Yeah, but the point is that he's having, what if there's 50? Well, what if there's, 10? And God says, okay, if there's 10, I'll save the city. Yeah. And there's not 10. There's like 5. Yeah. And so instead of sparing the city, God spares the people and then judges the city. And so, Abraham says this phrase there. He says, far be it from you, Lord, to judge the righteous with the wicked.
With the wicked, yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so there you go. I mean, we've covered a lot today, but I think that really kind of brings it down to why, kind of where we are with these particular passages, looking at tribulation, 2 stages, eschatology. We've covered a lot, and also tribute to John MacArthur. But so there's a lot today in our video, but I think it's important, as you've stuck with us this far, beginning with why this is important. And this is a lot of why it's important and a lot of why we come to the conclusions that we do. But it's important for you, as Pastor Nick has pointed out, don't just kind of be that eschatological agnostic out there. I mean, I used to fall into that camp. I'm like, I'm on the first bus out of here kind of idea, And so, and I think, come Jesus, come. But we need to come down. And as you said, does it create fear or does it create hope? Does it create urgency or does it create apathy? Mm-hmm. These...
you said it better than I did.
These are important things to think about when you're thinking about how you think about end times. Are you thinking about what's happening on the news? These kind of things, when you read the word, what are the feelings that are coming up? And what is it driving you towards? And so I hope that's kind of been what you've taken away from this video. It's some things to think about. And as we said, we're talking about future events. So everything's with an open hand. But it is important that we come to some conclusions on some things because, as you said, it shapes how we live our lives. And so hopefully that's your takeaway from that. I'd love to hear your thoughts, conclusions, questions, interact with us. We'd love to talk with you. And we already got a preview for chapter 25. You want to join us on Sunday? We'll be in Matthew chapter 25. So we'll see you then. God bless.